All right, so we're recording. So welcome everyone to TAM Lab number 17. Today I'm going to be going through two different subjects, two different topics here, because I don't think either one will take the full hour, but I could be wrong. So number one, I'm going to start off doing an ESXi on ARM or a Raspberry Pi demo. And then if there's time, I want to get into a vSAN witness host, essentially changing that out, right? Simulate a failure of the witness host and then correcting that, right? So from an agenda perspective, I'll cover the ESXi on the Raspberry Pi first. So I'll go through kind of a quick intro and background on that. We'll go into the DCUI. I'm going to try and share my screen through my iPad, which is pointed at my monitor, so you can watch it boot up. So there's cables running everywhere, so keep your fingers crossed that this goes all right. Then we'll jump into an SSH session, and we'll do some other stuff there, and then we'll get into the vSAN stuff. So real quick, from a TAM Lab perspective, we do have these 4 channels set up from a social media perspective, and I would encourage everyone to get more involved. Go visit our SharePoint site, which is on the bottom right there. There's the link to that. But feel free to use Socialcast or Slack or Teams if you like. And then real quick, if you have an idea for an upcoming session, for a TAM Lab session, please reach out. We did just add a new link on the SharePoint site on the left side. It's basically a link to a form. So if you have a new idea for a session, you can click on that and fill it out, and we'll get that then. So, all right. So jumping into the Raspberry Pi demo here. First of all, you're probably wondering, how did I get my hands on a Raspberry Pi running ESXi, right? Because it's fairly new. We just announced it back at VMworld in Barcelona. You know, we had Pat on stage with Ray O'Farrell, and they essentially introduced ESXi running on a Raspberry Pi, right? Let's see. So how did I get my hands on it, right? So I was recently, what's the word I'm looking for? Accepted into the CTO Ambassador Program. And we had our CTOA conference the last week of February. So we were all in Palo Alto for that. And it was amazing. We had all these different sessions from the BU leaders around, you know, our products and our strategies and things like that. And we had a few sessions on edge computing specifically, right? So Chris Wolf had an ESXi demo running on a Raspberry Pi, and he was able to coordinate that everyone at the conference get a Raspberry Pi running ESXi, so we can take that back to the field. We can show customers, you know, demo it at vMugs, things like that. So just to kind of talk about our strategy as it relates to edge computing and things like that. So that's essentially what I'm doing here today, right? So real quick, just to talk about edge computing, I know I usually don't like to do PowerPoint, but I'm going to do just a couple slides here. So why edge computing, and what are we doing from a strategy perspective? So if you think of like the most common use case from an edge computing perspective, you think of like a factory that has a bunch of machines on a factory floor, right? And they're all generating a ton of data, and maybe they want to do some kind of real-time machine learning number crunching on that data and make smart decisions on it, right? So rather than send all that data up to some central data center and then crunch the data, the idea behind edge computing is we can have all these little compute nodes within the factory, on the factory floor, crunching that data real time, and that way we're able to make quicker, faster decisions on that data, right? So that's kind of like the most common use case. I think Matt Mancini, if you're out there, I know you work with, I forget your customer's name, but they're a big one, and they've got all sorts of interesting use cases around edge computing.
Right.
So I think we're going to start seeing a lot more of this. Think of, rather than moving the data to the compute, we're now moving the compute to the data, and we're able to act on it much faster, right? So just a reminder, our ESXi ARM product is not actually a product, so it's not something we can sell, but it is something that we've been working on. When I say we, I mean VMware. We've been working on it for over 5 years, so I think we recognized early that there's potential there. We just don't have a real strong market for it, but that's starting to emerge here. So that's why we've started to make it public and let folks know that we are working on it. We do have a product here And we are actively working with customers to identify those use cases. So if you think you have a customer that has an interesting use case where edge computing could be a real good fit for us and our ESXi on ARM, please reach out, because we are looking to work with customers and develop our strategy in that regard. So one of the cool things about our ESXi ARM platform is that because ARM 64-bit is now much more standards-based, we're able to essentially leverage the same ESXi code across multiple different ARM processors like we do with x86, right? So it's much more enterprise-ready. 32-bit versions of ARM were very one-off and customized, and it was difficult to kind of move that into the enterprise and do it much more consistently, right? So with our platform, we'll be able to do things like high availability, vMotion, fault tolerance, which is very important for edge workloads because typically they're not all that resource intensive from like a CPU memory perspective, but they do need to be highly available, right? So you can throw a couple of these small little edge devices in some factory, and having one VM running on a single appliance with maybe a fault tolerant VM on another appliance, just making sure that it's always up and ready to go is important, right? So again, this is going to be the same look and feel for virtual administrators or Linux admins, even developers, right? Because these commercially supported Linux distributions like Ubuntu or SUSE, right? They work on ARM, and really there's no difference from a virtual administrator perspective. And even if you're writing code, like let's say Python code, it's still the same type of Python code. So it won't be that difficult to kind of make this transition over to ARM processors if your application is already leveraging some of those technologies that are kind of agnostic to the underlying processor, so to speak, right? Again, same user experience. So this is a snapshot of an ESXi on ARM processor. This is the host client, so not vCenter, but you spin up the host and browse to the URL, and here's what you get. It looks almost identical to x86, right? And then from a vCenter perspective, it's very important that we have a single pane of glass, right? We don't want to have multiple silos and different workflows for managing your ARM-based hypervisors versus your x86 hypervisors, right? So we can commingle all these different hypervisors in the same vCenter and manage them with the traditional methods that we've done for years, right? So I think that's going to be a strong point for us as we move into the edge computing world. And then this slide just kind of shows some of the different form factors that we're seeing out on the edge. So Chris Wolf and Daniel Beveridge were at I think it was a VMUG UserCon a couple of weeks ago in Sydney, and they demonstrated ESXi running on one of these network cards. This is a SmartNIC card, so it has an ARM-based processor, and its intended use was to do very network-centric things like maybe offloading data encryption, or maybe running even a small firewall, right? But since it's ARM-based, we can put ESXi on there and maybe have a small VM that's crunching data from a machine learning perspective as it's coming into the NIC, right? So it's a very powerful concept. So the intent of this slide is just to kind of show that there's all sorts of different interesting form factors as it relates to edge, and we'll see a lot of different devices like rugged devices and things like that. So think more industrial based, I guess. And that was pretty much it for the slideshow. I just wanted to kind of go through some of the strategy that we have around it. Again, we are looking for customers that have a use case for this. I think working closely with them is really going to help define our strategy and where we're going as it relates to edge and ESXi on ARM. So let me jump out of the PowerPoint here. I did put together in a Word doc a bunch of resources, so I'll put this out on the TAM Lab site when I post the recording. So William Lamb wrote a great blog all around ESXi and Raspberry Pi. There was a vSpeaking podcast a couple weeks ago that was really good, talked about not just the Raspberry Pi, but ESXi on ARM and kind of our strategy and edge computing there. We do have a Socialcast group, so if you have a customer that has a use case you think and you want to get them involved with the team, I would reach out to Socialcast first. Otherwise, you can also reach out to me. I know some of those folks, and I can help point you in the right direction. We have a wiki internal all around ARM. This is very technical, so if you're interested in the technical details, I would go there. And then this is just a news article around that UserCon that Chris Wolf was at a couple weeks ago. So talking about the network card, so interesting stuff. All right, so enough of that. I'm going to jump into the demo here. So let me go here. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And any questions before I move forward real quick? All right.
Hey, Steve, I think you hit on it, but one thing to add to this too is if folks are interested in this ARM technology, you might want to also look at it. This is a public project. It's called Cascade. And a lot of times your customers will have FPGAs around ARM technologies, and we're doing some things in there. But if you go out to GitHub and look up VMware Project Cascade, you can find a ton more information on those things.
Cool. I was not aware of that, so I'll check that out.
You bet.
All right, so what I'm doing here, hopefully everyone can see this. I have my iPad connected to my laptop, and through Zoom you can share your iPad screen. And on my iPad I have my camera app open, so it's pointed at my monitor, and I'm going to boot up the Raspberry Pi. I wanted to do this live. I also have it recorded just in case, but hopefully you guys will be able to see this. So I'm going to turn it on, and you guys should be able to see it boot up. So there it goes. So I'm actually going to interrupt the boot loader here real quick. So if you can see this, can everybody see this first of all, real quick? Are we good?
Yes. Yep.
Excellent. All right. So it has a little grub bootloader here. So typically, if you just let it go, it's going to boot into ESXi on ARM. But the demo that they've given us, it also has a Photon 3.0 OS running it. So I'm going to quickly boot into that and just show you our Photon OS, because version 3.0 now includes ARM support. So this is natively running on a Raspberry Pi Photon OS, right? So I can log right in. And I've got a small little Linux kernel here running on Photon, right? Not much there. I'm not going to do much in here. Where did I go? Oh, there we go. Okay, so you can see there's the file system and all that. So that's pretty cool, but let me get into the ESXi part, because I think that's what everybody wants to see here. So I'm going to reboot. I'm not going to interrupt it, and it's going to boot up into ESXi. It takes about a minute and a half to boot up, and to shut it down, it takes literally like 4 seconds or something like that, so it's pretty quick. Hopefully this is coming across okay. But you can see it is running ESXi version 6.8.4, which is obviously newer than our current supported release 6.7 U1, soon to be U2. One thing to note, the onboard NIC that comes with the Raspberry Pi does not work. It's an unsupported NIC, so I did have to buy a USB gigabit NIC, so I have that plugged in. But otherwise, I mean, it works right out of the box here.
Which USB NIC did you buy?
I forget. It was the one that Chris recommended in the email, if you remember. I can share the link here as well. But it was like cheap. It was like 15 bucks or something like that on Amazon.
Yeah, Chris Green has got a question in chat there too around, are you just running a micro SD card, or are there other changes than the USB NIC that was mentioned?
Yeah, so good question. It is just an SD card. So when we were at the conference, it was actually pretty funny. So Chris Wolf, we were all in a session. He was showing the Raspberry Pi, and then at the end of the session, he said, "Some of you, if you look under your chairs, you may have a Raspberry Pi to keep and take home, right?" So we all looked, and there were none there. He did the whole Oprah thing. He says, "Okay, you get one, you get one." Everybody got one, right? So we walked out. Everyone got a Raspberry Pi, and then they just handed us the SD cards, right? I think they're a 32 gig SD card, and it just had the image preloaded on there. So nothing other than that. I think it does have the ability to attach a separate USB drive and format that as VMFS if you wanted to run some additional VMs, things like that. So All right, so it is fully booted up at this point. Let's see, do we have any more questions? I guess not. Okay. Again, feel free to speak up if anyone has questions. This is meant to be interactive. So, all right, so now I'm logged in. I'm going to go to F2. Default password or username is root, no password. And you can see the DC UI is essentially the exact same as you would typically see, right? So you can configure the management network. I actually have two network adapters, two USB network adapters. I'm only using the one right now, but I could set them both up, right? You can put in your VLAN, you can configure the IP, DNS, all that stuff. We can get into the system log, so we could look at the VM kernel log if we wanted to, right? Pretty straightforward. Any questions on that? If not, I will stop sharing. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I got a question. Sorry, I'm an SE, so I don't have the technical abilities that you awesome TAMs do. But would you ever run this in your home as kind of a personal lab?
So that's a great question, and there's been a lot of buzz around running a vSAN witness host on a Raspberry Pi, just because they typically don't do a whole lot from a compute perspective, and it's a really good use case. So I don't believe that's supported as of yet. I'm sure someone in engineering's got it to work, but I don't think it's officially supported, right? And again, this is all, it's not a product we can sell yet. So at this point, it's all kind of R&D. But I think there's definitely going to be some use cases for that, just because ARM processors are much cheaper and cost effective. And nowadays they do pack a punch too, right? So the new ARM processors in the iPads are actually really powerful. So it's come a long way.
Yeah, I'm thinking of an affordable way to build a lab in your house, and if you could do this with like 3 or whatever, that'd be pretty cool.
I think that's probably coming. I wouldn't suspect it to be running on Raspberry Pi just because they've only got like a gig of memory, but there are some very cost-effective ARM-based appliances out there that do have more memory. And I think this is all speculation, but I think over the next year or two, we'll start to see a lot more of that. And it's a great use case for home labs, right? Because it is cheap.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Steve. I just put, this is my Mancini, I just put a link in chat for everyone if they want to learn more about those Bluefield cards. But I think that's right in line with, I'm sorry, I didn't catch the last person who mentioned it, but that's right in line with what he's talking about. Is those cards could carry 16 gigabit of RAM, the ARM processor, and in some cases they're talking about even doing NVMe on those cards, network cards as well. So if you can imagine having a PCI bus that's just powered and having 3 of those in there, right? You could really set up a really tight little home lab to do some basic work, but they're not cheap right now. They're industrial ARM processors, which is different from the Raspberry Pi that we're seeing here. They're more robust, and their price tag is up there. It's like $2,500 for one of these cards right now. They're super expensive. But 2 things to look up. Look up hyperscaling and look up smart NIC cards, and you'll find scores of like Bing and Amazon and all these guys using those cards to do this in their data centers. And that's one of the reasons why VMware is getting into this as well. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'll take 3 at that low cost.
Yeah. I'll take a whole array.
Yeah. All right, so I've stopped sharing through my iPad and I started sharing my desktop again, so hopefully everyone can see that. And what I want to do is just SSH into the host now. So let me move this keyboard. Oh, that was the other thing I guess I didn't mention. So I do have a wireless USB keyboard attached, right? So I can do things like, shut it down, things like that. So, all right, I am SSH'd in. So let's see. First of all, let me talk about a couple things that I cannot do. So number one, there's no VPXA process running here, so I can't do any ESXi commands, right? It's not found, and that's a bit limiting. I think on the full-blown ESXi for ARM build that we have, all this stuff is included. This is just a very stripped down version just for Raspberry Pi, just to kind of show the power of our edge computing and where we're going, right? Just to get people's attention. So I can't run any ESX CLI commands. I also can't run any Vim CMD commands. There's no host D process running. That's why I can't run these. No VPXA means I can't connect it to vCenter, which is a bit of a bummer because I was really hoping I could use this for a witness host for my vSAN, but I think it'll be coming here eventually. But there are some cool things I can do here. So obviously I have the typical file system, right? You can see that's all there. I can run the DCUI and get directly into that, which is pretty slick. So I can, do what I would normally do if I was sitting at the console. I'll do a Control-C to quit. I can see if I run VMware-V, this is going to show me the ESXi build, the version and the build. So you can see it's 684. Let's look at the host name. ESXi arm on Pi dot my domain name. I can see the IP address with a hostname -I, right? If I run uname-a, it's just going to list, well, if I do uname ? I got these options here. If I just do a uname-a, it's going to print all those out. So you can see, again, the host name, the version, the build, what architecture, things like that. I do have VMKFS tools. Oops. I'm not going to run any of those commands, but I could do some things with VMFS if I connected a USB drive and format it and things like that using some tools through here. I can look at the VM kernel log, right? If I knew what I was looking at, this would be very interesting, but I'm not much of a support guy. And most importantly, I can run ESX top, right? So here we can see, here's all the daemons that are running. If I hit capital V, it's only going to show the VMs, right? So we do have a single VM running on top of this thing that they kind of embedded and built to run on startup. So it's called Tiny VM Hosted. And I can see CPU statistics, I can see memory statistics, right? I can see network stuff, whatever. But what's really cool is if I go to VNC, so before I do that, let me exit out of here and go back to the DCUI. You'll notice that they put a little note in here that says you can SSH to, or you can VNC into that VM. Oh, let me check the chat real quick here. Okay, cool. VMC, let's walk me through that, Matt. Let me go try that.
Yeah, no rush. You didn't have to break what you're saying there.
Go ahead.
So it's a VM CHDEV space -L.
No.
Probably not if it's not found.
Not so much.
VMK it is.
VMK CHDEV.
K. Yep.
Oh, yeah, we do have that.
Do that with a -L.
Oops. Oh man, I can't type today.
It's okay.
Nothing.
Let me try a capital L on this one, maybe.
Oh, I thought I did capital.
Huh.
There we go.
There you go.
No.
Still nothing.
Nothing.
Interesting it's there though. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah. Good question. All right, so if I pop back into the DCUI, you do see this note, right, that we can telnet our VNC directly into that VM. So that's pretty cool because they put some neat little things in there. So I'm going to open a VNC viewer app. And if I connect into that, this is running Debian in that little VM running on my ESXi on Raspberry Pi, right? And it's got some utilities like BusyBox, so we can do, well, if I just do help, I think it'll show all the commands we can run here. So all these things are supported, so I can do ping, whatever. You can see I've got network connectivity. You can see I've got an IP address. But what's really cool is they put in a directory here, where is it? Let's see, Easter egg. So if we move into the Easter egg folder, and click or run the run me. Now we're running FreeDOS, which, as I understand, is only x86, but it's running through an emulated version of that on Debian, on ESXi, on a Raspberry Pi, on an ARM processor. So they put a cool little program in here. So if I can run some quick basic commands. So if I do qbasic bin nibbles. Anybody remember this?
Yeah. Yep, been there. I was just wondering if you're going to like fire up Bouncing Babies or something like that from 1986. I'd love to see that run on here because it'd probably run at the right speed.
Yeah, right. It'd be pretty fast. No, color. And now I can play Nibbles, which is pretty cool. I gotta get that one over there. It's a little bit difficult to kill out of this, right? But I mean, you can play this. My Mac doesn't translate the keystrokes as these, 6 layers of inception that I'm going through. So I typically just have to let myself die and to get back to the main menu. But it is basic, right? So I could write like a Hello World app if I wanted here. It's been a while. No, I don't want to play again. Let's do a new file. No, I don't want to save. Print. Oops. Hello world, and we can run that. Yay. So pretty cool, right? Let me exit out of here. And I think I need to do quit emu. Get back to that. So I'm back into my Debian VM here. So they've included a pretty cool little tool there just to help kind of show the power of running a VM on a Raspberry Pi. So what else? That was pretty much it for the demo of the ESXi. Anybody else have any questions? All right. So,
I have one question, Steve. I wonder if some of the folks, listeners on the phone, do you think your customers are excited about this? And if so, why are they excited about it? I'd like to hear, if you have the time, I don't know. I'd like to hear why they would be excited about ARM and what they're thinking about using it for.
Yeah, I'll chime in. So one of my customers, this is Bill, one of my customers is responsible for antivirus for, all consumer and enterprise environments. And they're charged with antivirus on Windows 10. And that's now starting to run on ARM. And so their ability to leverage VMware services on ARM is critical for their ability to evaluate their solutions on Windows 10. And so this is, for them, they are very interested in this. And I've already started working with the PMs on it, but it's a really unique use case for them.
Do you think fault tolerance would be important to that customer?
Not for their testing. Their specific testing is very workflow based. It's just spin up a thing, test some use cases, wreck it, and then spin up a new one. So
I see. Okay.
Yeah, so fault tolerance isn't as important as just regular just virtualization flexibility.
Interesting. All right. Any other questions on the ARM-based stuff, the Raspberry Pi? I'm going to switch gears here in a minute.
A great job on this.
Thank you. Yeah, it's fun. I mean, it's a pretty cool little tool. The other cool thing is I can SSH from here into other things. I mean, if I had it carried around, it's a pretty cool SSH client that I can use. So I do plan on taking this out to my customers and just showing them. I feel like it may get their interest and spark some good discussions around edge computing and whatnot. So.
All right. I'll send you some DOS games. I have a pile of them. You want to try them on there? And
yeah, That'd be awesome.
Might be a little more interesting than Nibbler or whatever it was, right?
Oregon Trail.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Dump that on there. Look, I got a virus. It's dysentery.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So switching gears, like I suspected, that really only took like a half hour. So I thought, I recently just kind of redid some of my lab stuff. I used to have 2 hosts in a remote site where my witness host ran, and I just brought it all back to a single site, and I kind of collapsed everything. So I wanted to show the process to switch out a vSAN witness host in a vSAN cluster. So if you look at my prod cluster here, I've got 2 hosts, and those are directly connected with a 10 gig cable. It's essentially a robo vSAN config, right? It works great. It's super fast. I've got 128 gigs of memory in each. It's an awesome solution, but I do have to have that witness host. So it's running in a separate cluster. Obviously, you don't want that running in your vSAN cluster because chicken and an egg, right? So what I thought I could do today is simulate a failover or a failure of this witness host, and then go through the process of building a new witness host and what that looks like. So before I jump into that, any questions around what I'm doing or what I'm going to be doing here?
So you're running a vSAN cluster with an external witness host, is that right?
Yes, the external.
Right? Okay.
Yep, this witness host here that I've connected to vCenter is actually this virtual appliance running here in my cluster, right?
Got it.
So everything's happy if I go to my prod cluster and monitor and scroll down here to vSAN health. You can see everything's good. Everything's happy, right? So I'm going to right-click this host appliance that's running, and I'm going to kill it. I'm just going to power it off to simulate, okay, my witness host just blew up. If I give it a second here, things are going to start complaining. Everything's still running. The witness is really just used for quorum, right, to make sure that we don't have a split brain scenario. So if I do a retest here, I don't need to do the online one. That takes a little bit more time. This should go offline here in a second, and obviously we're going to have some problems. So let's pretend ESXi6 just died. So I'm going to now, well, first of all, I'd try to recover it if I could, right, in a real scenario. But let's just say it's dead. It'd just be faster to redeploy. So I'm going to right-click on my management cluster, deploy a new OVF. I already downloaded the witness appliance from the My VMware site. So I put it on my hard drive, software, vSAN. This is 6.7 update 1. So I'm going to deploy this. Typical process of how you would deploy an OVF. I'm going to name this one 05 rather than 06. And I'll put it in my management folder. It's going to go in my management cluster. And I think I saw on the participants, Diane is out there. She's my vSAN SE in my area. So not to put you on the spot, Diane, but if you have anything to add while I'm going through this, it'd be awesome to have your expertise here, if you're still on. So it recognized the OVF. I'm going to click next. I'm going to, of course, read the EULA. For my environment, I'm just going to do tiny. Typically, you would want to do a medium in a production environment, or even a large if it's a large environment. Sure, I'll put it on that host, and I'm going to thin provision. And now the the witness host appliance here comes with 2 NICs out of the box. The first one is going to be your management network. So think of a typical ESXi management VM kernel NIC, and then a separate network for the witness traffic, which in a production environment, you would definitely want to have all that traffic segmented and separated. So I really only have the 1 port group in this management cluster, so I'm going to keep them both on VM network. And all I need to do is set a password and click next, and that should do it. So we'll give that a couple seconds. It should deploy here pretty quick. And again, if I go back to the cluster, You can see this host is disconnected, it's unhappy. We're having data integrity issues because there are some witness components of the vSAN objects that get stored on the witness. Obviously, our stretch cluster, the witness isn't found. It's just all unhappy, right? Our stats DB object is not healthy either because that's technically a vSAN object as well. So this is almost done. All right, so that finished. So if we look at it, it is 2 CPUs, 8 gigs of RAM, and a couple hard disks here. Not a big footprint really. So I'm going to power that on. And we can hop into the DCUI, watch it boot up. And there's just a couple things I need to do to configure this. And then I can fix the vSAN cluster and we should be good to go. Does anyone, just curious, anyone on the call, do they have customers that are using this type of configuration in like a robo scenario, you know, the 2-node with the direct connect 10 gig? Just curious if there's anybody out there that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nice. I have one customer that's looking at it. They have a bunch of remote sites with really old hardware that needs kind of a refresh, and they're trying to do it cheap. And I think this is a great solution because it can grow, right? So if they grow beyond the capacity of just a 2-node vSAN cluster at these sites, they can always just add another host, and then at that point they would need a 10 gig switch if they didn't already have it.
Where do you find folks placing the witness host at?
I think the typical use case or deployment scenario is they put the witness host back in their central data center, assuming they have connectivity, right, over a WAN from all these robo sites. But I think that's what they do.
I'm trying to solve an issue with a container ship with this. Unfortunately, they only have maybe two data centers at most on a container ship. And there's not a good place for the witness, right? Not like you're going to put it in a container, haha. But
you said container at first, and I'm thinking, oh, okay, we're talking.
Yeah, it's a Docker container, right? It's a big boat. No, literally, it is a ship that hauls containers, right?
Okay.
And we're literally trying to figure out where to put the witness host because there's just not really a good place, you know?
Yeah.
What about the captain's office?
Yeah, it's on one side of the boat or the other, right? And if one side goes on fire, then it's just all right. No worries.
He could run it on a Raspberry Pi or keep it around his neck with a Wi-Fi NIC or something like that.
There you go. Portable witness. You got a new model there. That's not a bad idea.
Alrighty, so this is booted up. I'm gonna go into F2, I think. Here we go. So number one, I'm gonna set the management IP address. It does have 2 NICs, but obviously one of them is being used on that other VM kernel port for the vSAN traffic, which I'm going to change that, but let's just change the management IP here. I don't have a VLAN for that network, so we don't have to worry about that. So I'm going to do static. And I think, yeah, 24. And I already have a DNS record set up for this, so that should be good. I'll leave IPv6, my DNS. Picked up everything except I want ESXi-05 local. And it's already got my DNS suffix here, so escape. Yes, I want to restart the network, and I'll do a quick test of that to make sure everything looks good.
Do you have to change the routing to for the witness traffic to go over the management network?
So in my case, that's a great question. So in fact, I'm going to kind of get into that here. So, all right, so this is all set up. I'm going to get back to your question in a sec here. So I can close this. And next step now, I want to connect this host into my vCenter. Oops, 05. And let me shut my office door because my cat just walked down and she's going to start screaming. All right, accept the certificate. And you do get the vSAN witness of a license here when you deploy the appliance. And I'm going to put it, any VMs that are running on there in the management folder, but obviously there's no VMs running on it. And that's that. So now this should come online, and then I'm going to do some changes to the network just so it fits into my lab environment. But we can talk about that question, which was a good question. So, all right, so it's up, it's in vCenter, it's now available to add as a witness host, although I need to do some changes here first. So this is obviously, it looks exactly like a typical ESXi host, right? It is running ESX. So first of all, let's look at the networking. It does come with a 2 standard vSwitches. So the first standard vSwitch is for the management network, and it does have a VM network on here. I'm going to delete that because I'm never going to run VMs on this. I don't know if it's a good idea to be modifying this as much as I'm about to do, because it is a purpose-built appliance from VMware, and if you call in for support in a production environment, they're going to say, why did you do these things, right? So, but this is what I typically do, because for me, on my 2-node cluster here, they are using a 10 gig direct connect cable, so that's for the vSAN data traffic. However, the witness traffic needs to go out a different NIC, right, which is connected to my switch, which is able to communicate with this host here running in the other cluster. So back to your question around routing that traffic, I did have to change a setting on each of these hosts on the 2 nodes here, the actual compute clusters here. I had to specify, there's a command you can run, it's like ESXi vSAN network. Basically, you just tell the host which VM port to use for the witness traffic, because by default it's going to use the original VM kernel port for all vSAN traffic, but we want to split up the witness traffic to go over a different VM kernel. So I don't really have to make any changes to the witness itself, but I had to make changes to my 2-node cluster just so it understands where to route that traffic, right? Okay, so back to this witness host, I deleted the VM network port group, and technically, like I said, in a production environment, you would want to have a separate network or a separate VLAN for the vSAN witness traffic, but for me, I'm just running it all over the same default VLAN anyways, so I'm going to just do away with this whole other vSwitch and this other port group here. You can see there is a VM kernel port. If we go look at the VM kernel adapters, I have 2 out of the box, one for management and one for the vSAN traffic, right? So if we look at the properties of the vSAN one, it is running vSAN service, and the other one is just running the management service. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete the secondary one here, and I'm going to go back to the original one, modify that, and I'm going to choose vSAN as well. So it's doing both management and vSAN, which there's not a whole lot of traffic from a witness perspective. The vSAN data itself is heavy, and that you definitely want to have segmented, but for the witness traffic, it's fine, at least in a lab environment, to do it like this. So if I go back up to my virtual switch, I should be able to completely delete this secondary switch here, which we've done. And then I also, actually, let me connect this first, and then I'll show you essentially the jumbo frames situation we get into. So if I go back up to my prod cluster, which is the vSAN cluster, and go to configure, scroll down on the left under vSAN, if you go to fault domains, super easy. This is like a no-brainer. You click on stretch cluster and you change it. We're going to change the witness host to, oops, not that guy, my number 5 here. Let's see, there was somebody chatting. Oh, no worries. Okay. Yeah, so I'm going to choose my new host, click next. It is essentially making you specify the disks that are going to be added here. The witness appliance comes with 2 disks, one 10 gig, one 15 gig. So the 10 gig is intended to be the caching tier, right? And the 15 gig is intended to be the capacity tier. So just click those, click next, and click finish. And give that a couple minutes and it should sync up all the traffic or all the data, and everything should be good. We will have, if we go back to monitor and health, we'll give this a little bit of time. Yeah, it needs a second here to kind of stabilize as it reconfigures things. It is going to throw a warning about jumbo frames, essentially, but that packets with large MTU 9000 are able to communicate between all the hosts. And if you don't change the MTU settings on the virtual switch on the witness host, that's where it's gonna get dropped right there. And I'll show you where to fix that. So I go back to health. It's still doing its work here in the background. So it's going to update the configuration. And at this point, I can just completely remove number 6 from inventory because I don't ever want to use that again. And I'm going to delete the VM even. All right, so I'm going to do a quick retest. And while that's running, let me go check the chat. I think I see some stuff coming in. Okay, just folks having to drop, no worries. So some of these alerts will go away once all the data syncs, but we can make it go a little bit faster if we want. So if we click on object health, you can see there's reduced availability of some of the vSAN objects. We can repair those immediately. Typically it waits, I think, 60 minutes before it does that. So it may take a minute here before everything kind of comes back, but I'm surprised I'm not getting the MTU check here. This should be complaining. I guess it is able to do jumbo frames, but what I would typically do is go to this new vSAN host, go to the virtual switch, which we just have a vSwitch here, the standard vSwitch. We're going to edit that, change our MTU to 9000. And then if I wanted to, I could also do the VM kernel adapter. So I would edit that, change that to 9000. So if you were seeing that MTU warning or health alert, you could do that, and it would make that go away. But that is pretty much it. I mean, it's very straightforward. This should go here momentarily. It's just taking some time to sync. So you can see there's only 15 objects, whereas before it was like 60 something. So it should be almost done. And then everything will be green again. Any questions from anyone on the line? Any feedback, thoughts, concerns? Interesting use cases with your customers?
I think it was a great demo, Steve. It's Dale.
Hey, Dale. Thank you. Here we go. Everything's green.
No, I appreciate seeing this. I have a number of customers that are considering vSAN, and as their current storage kind of comes up, and it's nice to see how some of these activities can happen. I don't know that I have any questions beyond that because I just don't have the experience, but just seeing how you're doing it, what you're doing, what the use case is great to see. So thank you.
Yeah, you bet. One thing I'll mention here in this Word doc where I had all those other links for the ARM stuff, the Raspberry Pi, I put some good links down here for the vSAN stuff as well. So I should have put this one up top because this is kind of like where you want to go if you want to get familiar with vSAN. So we have what we call a microsite, storagehub.vmware.com, and it's all around VMFS and vVols and vSAN. So if you click on that, there's all sorts of really good walkthroughs of how to configure things and how to design things. Really good site. There's also a CMBU microsite. I think it's vrealize.vmware.com. So those are kind of becoming more typical. So that's a great resource.
I do have one question, and it's more of an architectural one. I think that are these witness hosts specific to a vSAN cluster, or can multiple clusters leverage the same one?
I believe it is a one-to-one relationship. So if you have multiple vSAN clusters and they need witness hosts, they each have to have their own.
Got it.
At least that was my understanding. That may have changed, or that may be changing. And if anyone on the line knows the answer to that, feel free to chime in. But I believe it is one-to-one at this point. I know that was kind of an area that customers gave a lot of feedback around, like, why do I have to have so many witness hosts when I've got all these other, robo vSAN clusters? And I think they definitely took that to heart, and they're probably making some changes around it. So
yeah, one of my customers was asking, because they're also considering VMC. Could they somehow leverage something up in the cloud, right, as part of, rather than buying another ESX host just to be a witness, they're already paying for stuff up there. Can they use it there? So it'd be interesting to see how that turns out.
Yeah.
So the witness, it is a one-to-one. There are changing it to do a share witness. It's part of a roadmap.
Oh, great. That's good to know.
I don't have exact time frame, but it's a roadmap.
Yeah.
When? We want to know when, Diane. I need a date.
2020.
No worries. Let's see, other links I have in here are official docs as far as deploying a vSAN witness appliance. Here's the download to the appliance if you want it, and then here's a nice blog that kind of talks about what is the witness host, why do we need it, what's it doing, that sort of stuff. So I'll be sure to post all these links with the recording, and I'll send that out here hopefully by the end of the day. But that was pretty much all I had, so I'm glad I did 2 topics, because I was worried that they weren't going to take up the full hour, which was perfect. So anything else from anybody? We got 5 minutes. All right. Well, I'll let everybody go. Thanks for joining, and have a good week and a good weekend.